Just a quick introduction. Thank you everyone for coming. Alistair is calling in from the UK again this week, which is great.
Morning, guys.
Absolutely beautiful lineup of wines to taste, which hopefully you've all got in front of you. Everyone's popped the tops on all the wines, let them breathe a little bit, which we, especially when we get to the Barolo and the Nebbiolo, it absolutely requires it. And I'd also like to just do a quick introduction of one of our favorite suppliers. It's Dottore Matteo Ascheri. I'm just going to take you off mute for a second here, and give me one. Where are you? There's so many people here. Where are you? We've got Ascheri. There it is. I'm just going to unmute you now. It's very slow at the moment because we have lots of people. Okay, so Matteo, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you here. We can't, Matteo, I'm sorry, we can't quite hear you. Sorry guys, just trying to, can't seem to be able to unmute Matteo here. Doesn't seem to want to come off. Look, it's all good. Let's. Everyone here in this group is able to unmute themselves. I've allowed you guys to just unmute yourselves. All you need to do is just press the unmute button. So if you do have a question, please do feel free to ask. I'm not going to lock anyone out of this. Obviously, feel free to, as we did last week, feel free to use the chat box as well, and to ask questions. We've got Luke in our office in Sydney who's going to be asking us any of the questions that you put through on the chat. So feel free to do that as well. I think that worked quite well last week. Otherwise, we might get kicked off. It looks like pretty much everyone's in here now. So welcome everyone. Thank you for coming again. And we're going to get started through the region of Piedmont. So everyone has a glass or several glasses in front of them, and we're going to be pouring ourselves the Dolcetto to start with. So let's move through Italy. So again, just a wrap up of what we did last week. We're moving through Italy from kind of north to south. We're staying in the north as well this week. However, we're going from the northeast to the northwest to one of our favorite regions, definitely. And hopefully by the end of this, you'll find out it's one of your favorite regions as well. So again, just running through the basic history of Italy, how important wine is, just trying to reiterate that to you guys here. So grapes are an integral part of Italian life, and that is very, very much a part of life in Piedmont. So as you'll see here from this map that I've just put up here, this is a map of the state of Piedmont, which is right up in the northwest corner of Italy. As you can see, pretty much every region is a wine region, and there are just acres upon acres of wine made within this area. Now, it's a very unique part of Italy in that it's, I'm just going to go through here a quick summary of Piedmont. So Piemonte means, in Italian, means the foot of the mountain, which is exactly where we are. If we go back one screen, you can see surrounding to the north and to the west of this area is not only the border of Italy with France, but it's all mountainous. It's all very, very mountainous. So this area here is literally the foot of the mountains, hence the name. So it was originally, not a lot of people know this, it was actually the center of the Kingdom of Savoy, or Savoie, which was a very interesting very interesting group of people. Now Savoy is in the very west of France, which is due north of Piedmont. It's now called Savoie. But the House of Savoy was instrumental in the unification of Italy. And the unification across all of Italy actually started in and around Turin and Piermont. So it played an instrumental part in making Italy what it is today. Because of its geography and where it is, location-wise, being surrounded by France to the north and to the west, there's a lot of influence that French winemaking has on the wines of Piemonte. And quality is definitely the focus, not quantity. It is Piemonte is actually one of the least prolific regions in Italy for making wines. It does not a huge amount of wine comes out of there. We tie that back to what we said last week, where we were in Prosecco and we're talking about Pinot Grigio from the Veneto, where these areas were some of the most prolific in Italy. Now we're going to the other side where it's some of the smallest production regions. And relating to that, over 75% of the wine made in this area is of DOC or DOCG quality. So the two highest levels of quality that you can get in Italy is 75% of the wine made here, which is an enormous percentage. So there's more than 60 DOCs and DOCGs spread throughout Piemonte. And they represent a very, very high quality areas, very unique geographies that have been established over many, many centuries. So the weather in Piemonte is also very unique when you compare it especially to the south. It's a very, very big difference from the north to the south. Very hilly, as we said, the foot of the mountains. And there are only very specific grape varieties that are suitable for this area. It's that the winters can be very, very harsh, as I'm sure Matteo can attest to. It snows there every year, obviously, and fog is a constant throughout the growing season as well, which we'll touch on a little bit later as we get to one of our favorite grape varieties, Nebbiolo. So that's just the basic background, bit of history, geography, climate of Piemonte, so you get an understanding of kind of where we are and why it's important. So now we're going to go on to the grape varieties, which are very, very important to the wines, obviously, but they're also very unique within this area. So we're looking at our first one is a Dolcetto. So hands up for who can name the other two red grapes. Matteo, you're not allowed to answer this. So we've got Dolcetto as the first one. Anyone else? The second grape variety?
Barbera, Nick, got it, nailed it.
Nick, Barbera, perfect, very good. And then the last but not least, what's the next red grape? And Jane, Nebbiolo, perfect. 3 from 3, very good. So, Dolcetto, Barbera, Nebbiolo, those are our 3 red grapes. Now here, this is the harder one. What are the white grapes allowed? Can anyone answer that one? What have we got? Nick, Cortese, perfect, very good. Cortese is one. That's famous in the region of Gavi. Anyone else? There's one other that is very, very, very popular. Anyone? Ali, any ideas there?
I'm seeing a lot of blank faces here, Mark.
Blank faces.
Chardonnay?
Chardonnay? No, not quite. No, there's another grape. Yeah, Arnace is the last one. Absolutely. Arnace is the final grape variety. So don't worry, there won't be too many questions. Don't worry. So we're going to be focusing on the reds tonight, obviously. However, the whites do play their important role, but tonight we really want to dig deeper into the reds. So we're going to start with Dolcetto, which means in Italian, the little sweet one. So the little sweet one, I'm not so sure about little sweet one. It's not sweet particularly. Dolcetto is a really early ripening grape variety. It gets a lot of color. You look at those are in the background there. Those are Dolcetto grapes. They're a really vibrant, deep blue, almost like a bruised purple color. They're really distinctively colored grapes. It has relatively low acidity in them, and they create these soft wines. So let's all pour a glass, and let's taste through this together to see if what I've written here while I wasn't tasting the wine is actually correct. But
just tell everyone. So I've just poured myself a glass, but it's early in the morning. So I'm using this wonderful Coravin system that I presume quite a few of you have seen. So I don't have to open the bottle. So I put it through the cork, and you can get a glass of wine out without having to open the bottle, which is great. Don't know if you just explain, if you guys saw what I was doing, that's what I'm doing. I've got a glass without opening the bottle.
Nothing terribly untoward there. Very good. Okay, so I am getting a pretty clear picture here. So for me, the thing that really jumps out at me with Dolcetto is that first statement. It's a low acidity grape when it comes off the vine. These wines, what that equivalates to in a grape, in a wine, sorry, they tend to feel in the mouth rounder and softer. And I get this very, very clearly in this wine. This one is by a producer called Pietro Rinaldi, who we work with in Australia solely. We're the sole importers of this wine. Pietro Rinaldi are a tiny, tiny little producer in the sub-region is called Madonna di Como. And Dolcetto is a Dolcetto di Alba. So it's from the Alba region, which I'm just going to go back quickly to. Alba is just here. Down in the south here is Alba. And Dolcetto de Alba is just down, is that area just on the, it's kind of on the very western side, Dolcetto de Alba. Okay. So this wine is, it's basically, it was explained to me as by the producers in Pietro Rinaldi, by the family there. This is the wine that you drink when you're waiting for the Nebbiolo to be ready. So this is not a wine that you drink, that you put in the cellar for 10 years and you expect it to become richer and rounder and more complex. This is the wine that I've actually, this is at room temperature now, so which is in Sydney right now, which is about 13 degrees. This is the absolutely perfect temperature to be drinking this wine at.
I think you're right. You're right there, Mark. Sorry to jump in. That I think it's the wines as well that the Piemontese would say that they drink at lunchtime. You know, it's that kind of. Absolutely. It's probably the least. What is it? The grape with the least character, or the least serious grape that they produce. Yet commercially, it's one of the most important because it ripens early and they get it out to the market quickly. So I think it's really an important grape variety, and just one that's super easy drinking. I think I've seen someone put up there, super easy drinking. That's right, isn't it? It's juicy, it's fruity. You've got to be careful not to get too much tannins. It's generally moderate in acidity versus Barbera, which we're not trying tonight, which is got lots of acidity. It's a wine to be drunk young, fruity, fresh, super easy. I think it's delicious.
Mark, I've got a question, and perhaps we could flip it over to Matteo. Jane has asked, does low acidity generally mean it's not going to age? And I guess we could extrapolate to other wines as well.
Yes, it's true. First of all, thank you very much for the introduction. It was fantastic, great. On Dolcetto is what we really drink in Piedmont every day. So it's our everyday. It's true that the acidity is not higher like the Barbera, but it's still a wine that could age. Let's say maybe then not for a long time, but 3-4 years is really a good time also to have a Dolcetto. Of course, we prefer the Dolcetto fresh immediately after the harvest time, because exactly we have other wines that can age better, Barbera and mostly Nebbiolo. So we prefer the Dolcetto in a fresher version. But at the end of the day, exactly, it could age 3-4 years with no problem. Of course, you're losing a little bit of fresher character, gaining much more complexity, but it's a wine that normally Piedmontese wines are aging all in a good way. So no problem at all also to age the Dolcetto for 7 years.
And how, Matteo, first of all, I've got to say, just to reintroduce Matteo, we're super lucky to have Matteo Ascari, who, of Ascari Wines, we're going to try 2 of his wines. He's also the man to know and to have here because he's the president of the Consorzio di Barolo. So I hope my pronunciation was good. So this is the man that knows everything about Barolo. So when we get to these wines, let's get some questions going to him because he's going to be able to answer far better than I am on these questions. But thank you. Thanks, Matteo, for joining us. Just another question on this. For you, how important commercially then is Dolcetto to your winery?
For me, it's a wine, first of all, that I love. This is the most important thing. Then I believe that exactly is a good expression of Piedmont. It's a simpler expression comparing Nebbiolo and Barbera, but it's a great good expression. A wine exactly that you can approach it in a good way. So much simpler that you can really sell commercially immediately. I'm not saying after the harvest time, after some months, of course, because you still have a good complexity. But commercially is a good wine. Of course, the name itself could be a little bit confusing because Dolcetto means little sweet one, and the wine is not sweet. But is another expression of Piedmont, much more friendly, much more approaching. So is a good thing. I believe that Dolcetto in the future will be really highly appreciated also outside of Piedmont. As I said, in Piedmont we don't drink Barolo every day, or whatever. We drink mostly Dolcetto. So the consumption is much more exactly in our area or in Italy, but also outside Italy is starting to be known. So I believe that for the future Dolcetto will be a great, even more important commercially speaking part for our production.
Okay, thank you very much. And we got a question from Nick. Is it the grape that is sweet rather than the wine that is made from it?
Yeah, the name is exactly little sweet one because it's the first red grape to get ripe, and it's very sweet, mostly for the sugar content, but even more for the low acidity. So it's referred to for the taste of the grape itself. But the wine exactly is completely fermented, so no residual sugar. And then I have to say that the problem of Dolcetto, that the tannic structure of Dolcetto could be a little bit harsh and not noble like the Nebbiolo. So it's very nice to have very short fermentation, not to extract too much, exactly to work much more on the approachability on this kind of, to have much more round, soft style of wine. Otherwise, if you ferment and you macerate for a longer, too many days, the risk is that to extract too much structure, and this could be a little bit of a problem. So we prefer exactly a wine that is easy drinking and really that you can appreciate in the early month.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matteo. So just to reiterate with everyone, I mean, there's a many years ago in Australia, there was quite a famous commercial producer made a Dolcetto Syrah, which was very, very sweet. And so I think Dolcetto got painted with that brush for many years. But I think the important thing to remember from what we're talking about right now, if you're getting an Italian Dolcetto, it's not going to be sweet. It's going to be completely bone dry like this. It's, for early consumption, enjoyable wine, fresh, a little bit of that fruity character. I get a little bit of a grip of tannin, but it's not overtly tannic in any way. So
juicy.
Absolutely juicy. It's a juicy, drinkable wine. So yeah,
lovely.
So let's open it up to the floor. What do we think about Dolcetto? I'd be mostly interested to see if this is anyone's first Dolcetto, especially of this style, to see if we enjoy this as a wine. I can see someone put up there. This is Piedmontese Beaujolais, which I love the analogy of. Absolutely love.
That's good. Any other thoughts?
So any other thoughts there, Luke?
Yeah, it reminds me of a Beaujolais. It's a very nice drink. But it's a relatively simple wine. It's clean. It's got juicy fruit, and it's just a very nice drink.
Completely agree. Absolutely.
I agree, Graham. And I think scheduled in for a Sunday afternoon, this one.
That's a very, very good point. I mean, one thing that we absolutely adore about our friends at Pietro Rinaldi is the fact that they do make wines that are that are not at all rustic or old school. They're very modern, and I think for the Australian palate especially, where I don't think we even realise we do, but we definitely need that cleanliness and line tried and true. So these guys at Pietro Rinaldi, they definitely make a wine that stands up to that standard that we expect, which is great.
Absolutely.
Okay. So any other questions there, Luke, from the chat box there?
No, I think a lot of people are itching to get into the Nebbiolos, to be honest with you, Mark, and myself included.
Me too.
If I can, only 2 words on Dolcetto. Dolcetto is really a good word to describe is versatile. Normally, when we talk about red wines here in Piedmont, we talk about red wines that goes very well with fruit, as you can see from my shade. Anyway, but Dolcetto, exactly. You can start, you can end the meal with Dolcetto, but also you can have slightly chili on the side. So it's very versatile, and the complexity linked to the tannic structure and all these kind of things is a good complement, by the way, also. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Matteo. Okay, so now we're going to move on to one of my personal favorite grape varieties in the whole wide world, and that is to Nebbiolo. So Nebbiolo, just a few words on the grape variety itself. The Nebbiolo grape has been tied to the region of Piemonte since at least the 13th century. There are mentions of another high quality grape variety that may be Nebbiolo before this, but it has definitely been there since at least the 13th century. A lot of people theorize that it is an ancient relative of Pinot Noir, which would make a lot of sense with the Savoie relationship to the region, as well as the proximity to France. The name itself is thought to come from la nebbia, which is the word for fog in Italian. And fog is an intrinsic part of the area of Piemonte, and it grows well on those hills where the fog kind of rolls over the hills there. Now, interestingly enough, and this is bringing out the wine nerd in me, but it's very, very important to the quality of Nebbiolo as a grape. It is the first to bud and the last to ripen. So what does that mean? The first to bud means that it is the first grape variety that where the little grape buds, the little green buds, the inflorescences are fertilized and the little buds come out. Now, that's important because the first to bud is usually the one that is the most susceptible to frost, to spring frost. So early budding is not usually seen as an advantage. And then on the other side, the latest to ripen, it usually ripens. Matteo, you can fact check me here. Usually, I've heard that often it's ripening in October, November for you guys.
Right. Yeah, that's true. The traditional vintages is with a ripening period of middle October, end of October. And for some years, we had also early November.
Early November.
The cycle is very long.
So if you think about that from our perspective here in Australia, that would mean that would be kind of June, kind of getting to now when you'd be harvesting. So it's going to be cold outside. There's going to be risk of frost on the other side as well. There's going to be risk of rainfall and potentially even getting into the snow falling as well. So to have something that has that long a period of growth is important for two factors. It's important because that goes to show that it takes a long time for complexity to build up. You've got a long window within which the grape variety is able to develop flavor profile and develop complexity within there. And we'll be able to taste that in these wines, most definitely. But on the other side of that tells me from a more commercial perspective, you've got a wine that is susceptible not only at the start of the season, but at the end of the season. And you're still wanting to plant it. to me, that tells me that this grape variety, that whilst it is very fickle and whilst it is very difficult and susceptible to a whole lot of things, it must be worthwhile. It absolutely must be. And it also tells me that there are only a handful of regions in the world where this is going to work. There is only a handful of places where you're going to have that window that's wide enough for this grape variety to not only grow comfortably, but to fit within those the spring frosts and the late rainfalls and snow and everything like that, to develop enough complexity to go all the way through. So this is a grape variety that kind of makes Pinot Noir look like a comfortable, easygoing grape variety, I think. And I've heard many grape growers say that. There's only a handful of producers here in Australia that grow Nebbiolo. Luke Lambert is one of them, and we do a lot of work with Luke Lambert. And he has told me several times that Nebbiolo, if he didn't love it so much, he'd hate it. It's very, very difficult grape variety. It only likes certain soil types. It only likes certain, sometimes some years it just decides not to grow, and it's had enough, and just packs it up and leaves. So it's a very fickle grape variety. So hopefully,
I think, Mark, I'll just say something. I think for me, and I'm sure this will make Matteo smile, for me it is the greatest red grape, or the greatest grape from Italy. And I think people in I like the chuckle. I think, obviously the other great grape would be Sangiovese. Now, an interesting thing is Sangiovese, there's about 55 to 60,000 hectares of Sangiovese in Italy versus I think only about 5,000, maybe 5,500, Matteo, you can correct me, of Nebbiolo. It's a tiny percentage of Sangiovese. Sangiovese is prolific, and that comes back to exactly what Mark said, that this is a grape variety that is extremely site-specific and only performs in certain areas. So it's a grape variety that really, really talks of its place. And I think in this first wine, you can really smell that. Am I right with my figures there, Matteo?
No, it's perfect. It's a difficult grape to grow. And in this way, you have to say that we are very lucky, because exactly the best expression is in our area. In northern part of Piedmont, there is only another valley in Italy outside of Piedmont is Valtellina, but exactly it's a wine that really needs special conditions of weather and soil to produce a great product, and is a difficult grape to handle in the vineyard. So it's not an easy one, and in a certain way, it's positive for us, because it means that the development of this varietal in the world is very limited, and to produce great wines with this varietal is very, very difficult. So yeah, exactly, something really specific that not everywhere produce great, not everywhere, almost in Piedmont produce great wines. There are really few exceptions outside of Piedmont and Valtellina where you can find really great wine, and most of the time there are very variable results from one year to the other. So exactly, Mark expressed the perfect condition. Is a very long cycle of maturation from budding to ripening, and this is one condition. The balance of the water is a very vigorous varietal, so the balance between foliage and grape is complicated. So a lot of not an easy one, but okay. Yeah. Most of the time, from not easy things, the better things can.
Great, thank you. I remember when Mark and I first tasted this wine that we're tasting now, the Langhi Nebbiolo. We were in London, actually, Mark, when you were over, and we tasted this at the tasting here, and we both said we were looking to add some wines to the portfolio, and we said this is exactly what we want for Australia for a Langhi Nebbiolo. This wine it's clearly Nebbiolo. It's got those lovely characters that we want from Nebbiolo, but it's accessible as well. It's got lovely fruit and juiciness to it, and drive. It's almost it's juicy, modern, but still traditionalist, if you know what I mean. It's got everything you want from Nebbiolo. And I'd love to see what people think of this. I just think it's a gorgeous, gorgeous expression at a great price of Nebbiolo.
I absolutely agree, Ali, and distinctly remember where and when we tried this wine. It was at a wine tasting in London, obviously, and it was January, so it was very, very, very cold. However, where we met Matteo in this tasting, the room was all closed up and it was very stuffy and hot, and it was definitely not the best situation to be tasting.
Nowadays.
It was definitely was not, and everyone was wearing jumpers and sweating, but I still remember tasting this wine even in those situations and being absolutely gobsmacked by how impressive this wine is. I think it not only is it, I think, and I said this to Ali at the time, for people who don't know Nebbiolo or who are interested in trying something, that they're on the path with Pinot and they want to try something different. This as a wine to introduce you to Nebbiolo could not be more perfect. I've said this many times. This wine, to me, this is the gateway drug to into Piedmontese wine, but also into Nebbiolo in general.
Mark, can I jump in there and just put a question to Matteo, if it's okay?
Sure.
We've obviously spoken about vintage being quite important. How did 2017 perform?
2017 was a challenging vintage. We started with a problem with late frost at the beginning of the year, and then we had hailstorm, so really a production limited in quantity. A warm vintage at the end, early maturation. It's important to understand this. We were speaking before about the long maturation cycle of the Nebbiolo. This is much more in the traditional vintage, but we are experiencing more and more very warm years when the ripening season ends at the end of September, beginning of October, instead of, so let's say 15, 20 days earlier than usual. This means that we have a change in the style of production. We have rounder wine, softer wine, with a tannic structure much more evolved, lower acidity, and this is good for early drinking wines. This Langhe Nebbiolo is exactly made in this way. The best expression of Nebbiolo is with a very, what do you say, wines like Barolo, Barbaresco, so wine that have an aging of 3-4 years. Of course, you have a great evolution, but it's an evolution due to time and wood contact. On Langhe Nebbiolo, the concept is to have a wine that is the pure expression of the primary character of the grape. Not an easy grape, we were talking before, much more spiciness, much more floral character, but still a fruity wine with a lot of complexity. So the Langhe Nebbiolo is really a good introduction to this varietal, because exactly in Barbaresco we have the best expression, but it's an expression after many years of aging at the winery. So it's important for these kinds of things, the Langhe Nebbiolo. I thank Mark for the description. Is exactly what we would like to achieve, is to have a wine really where you can really meet this grape varietal in the right way. And then after this, you can experience other wines like talking about our area, Barbaresco and Barolo.
I think meet and fall in love is the statement there.
Grazie.
Yeah, prego. So, everyone, there seems to be a lot of positive feedback here on the chat box, which is great. This is a great, perfect introduction to where we are going. So,
I ask a question, Mark?
Of course, Graham, go for it.
The quick background is I haven't drunk a lot of Nebbiolo, but when I have, there's been tannin dominant and tannin overpowering the fruit. This wine is a lovely drink. It's got very good spicy fruit, and it's got what I'd call long, lean, softer tannin. So it's a beautiful balance. But is the tannin dominance, is that a function of age or the winemaking, or how do we get this lovely soft tannin here, and in my view quite often over tannic wines?
So that's a fantastic question, Graham, and we're going to throw that directly across to not only the winemaker but the head of the Consorzio di Barolo. Straight. So Perfect question for you there, Matteo. Thank you.
The tannic expression is a key point on all the Nebbiolo wines. And Nebbiolo is a varietal that is a tannic varietal. The tannic structure is much more in the skins. You can have in the seeds. You can have in the little part of the stem that you can find in the fermenting master. So it's crucial to handle this point in the best way. Shortening the length of the maceration is one part. First of all, everything starts in the vineyard. Okay, is the vineyard management that is important to achieve a good ripeness on the grape. But then the crucial point is the fermentation. Fermentation has to be very soft. Otherwise, the risk is really too long. Is to extract a lot of tannic structure. Sometimes this tannic structure is maybe not easy to dominate. I mean, that needs a lot of time. So it's important to the balance between the tannic structure, the acidity, the fruit content, and the alcohol content. This is really the key point in the production of a great Nebbiolo wine. So shortening fermentation, then the wood aging after this, that will be very long for a Barolo, for instance, has to be really much more a way to give the oxygenation to the wine instead of giving other tannins coming from the wood. This is why we are using much more a neutral style of wood like the Slavonian oak instead of the French oak, because otherwise we're adding tannins to a wine that already has a lot of tannins. So we prefer the natural cut of the tannins, so trying to extract not too much to avoid harsh, hard tannin structure, and then after this aging the wine in much more a neutral style of wood. So these are the key points.
That's absolutely perfect.
Thank you very much.
And one thing, if I may just touch on that as well to what you were saying, Matteo. So I definitely do get some tannin in this wine, absolutely, and I think that's impossible to avoid with a grape variety like Nebbiolo. And as we move on to our next wine, you'll see that even more. But as Matteo was saying, I get it as a softer tannin. It's not a hard, harsh, thick tannin. I get it as a more a framework of tannins rather than a real core, a hard, thick tannin core. So hopefully that's answered your question there, Graham.
Yes, it does. Thank you. It's supporting the fruit, not overpowering it. That's excellent.
Yeah. Well good.
So, with on that note, my glass is unfortunately empty, so we're just going to have to fill it up with something else. So, if we have no more questions on this gateway drug that I've introduced you all to, let's move on to our next wine. So, a famous line here from Jancis Robinson: the most powerful and dramatic expression of the Nebbiolo grape, that is Barolo. So it's been stated as this is in historical text, this is the wine of kings and the king of wines. There's been a strong relationship between the wines of Barolo with the House of Savoy historically, and it was this wine that was served. It was Barolo that was served at the court of the Savoy court. So that's kind of where its fame was started, and it's just gone on and on and on. I remember 10, 15 years ago in the wine industry, Barolo was a very, very, no one really knew much about it. And it's just been incredible to watch the popularity of this amazing wine grow within our industry here in Australia. It's been fantastic to watch. And I would encourage you all to pour yourself a relatively large glass of this one, because it's one heck of a wine.
It's incredible. I've just opened using my wonderful gadget, using my Coravin, and the smell, the perfume that's come through in this glass from opening this is just something else. And I think for me, that's one of the amazing things about Barolo and Nebbiolo, is that incredible perfume that some people call tar and roses or rose petal. And it really is. I cannot believe how much of that expression has jumped out of my glass already. I hope you guys maybe have decanted it. It could do with a little bit of air. but that's just smelling gorgeous.
Absolutely, that's right on. So, Matteo, I might just hand over to you, if that's all right. If you wouldn't mind giving us a bit of a rundown of the elements of this wine. So I've got a little map here. Well, it's not a little map; it's a relatively large map of Barolo. So I know that your family own land in a whole lot of different sections of Barolo, and that goes into this wine. So if you wouldn't mind running us through that.
Yes, exactly. First of all, it's important to say that the area is limited. We're talking about an area with 11 communes and a total amount of surface of 2,200 hectares. Actually, the production of the Barolo is about 14 millions and a half of bottles every year. But the most important thing that this production is divided in 350 different wineries. So there are a lot of different specifications. The grape varietal that you described perfectly before is one aspect: complexity, difficult to grow, sensible to different weather conditions and areas, soil character, inside also of the same area of the Barolo area. But on the other side, also the personal background. We are talking about small family businesses. This is what makes Barolo an interesting area, because we are talking about small producers producing wine with a different styles. So this is making things a little bit more confusing, because if you taste one Barolo, you can say that you just taste one Barolo among all the Barolo available, because you have really different approaches. Going back to years, because most of the production dates back to the middle of the 19th century. So this is the map that we are seeing is the map of this official single vineyard. There are 170 single vineyards inside of the area. So it's a really specific delimitation. As I told you, 11 communes. Of these communes, 3 are the most important, talking about the Carta, Barolo, Castiglione Falletto, and Serralunga, for the fact that they are completely inside of the Barolo area. For the other 8 communes, the other important are Monforte, La Morra, Verduno. Only one part of their territory of the land is inside of the Barolo area. But exactly inside of this area, a lot of different characters linked to different kind of soils, and also a little bit of microclimate characters. So really a very complex pictures at the end of the day. Small picture, because exactly we're talking about a small production, even more considering the number of the wineries, so single wineries, and for all these specific complexity.
Fantastic. Thank you, Matteo.
There you go.
Very good insight. So as Alistair pointed out before, and I cannot help but reiterate exactly what he said, that classic nose that a lot of people describe Barolo as, and Nebbiolo in general, but Barolo and Barbaresco to a more specific extent, is tar and roses, which is something that is it's hard to explain until you stick your nose in and you really get it. So
Yeah.
it's a beautiful mix of earthy characters, but also beautiful floral characters. So,
yeah. And it's a grape variety, obviously. It's quite a strange grape variety when you think a grape variety that has high acidity, high tannins, low color. It sounds like it might not work as a grape variety, but this shows how incredibly beautiful those things come together. And it's a wine that obviously ages so incredibly well. What about, this is vintage 2015, which I believe was a fantastic vintage. Can you tell us more about the vintage in this particular wine, Matteo?
Yes, 2015 was another warm year. So exactly, we can divide. In the last years, we were quite lucky. We had really great vintages, but we can divide the vintages in these with two specific characters. We have vintages that are very, very warm, 17, 15, 12, 11, 9, and so on. And where exactly the ripening season is very concentrated, with harvest at the end of September, beginning of October. means very round, soft wine, softer tannins, good fruit character, good concentration of fruit, so very approachable wine. On the other side, you have much more traditional vintages, like maybe 19, talking about the last one, or 13, or 10, 8, 6, where the cycle of maturation is much longer, harvest at the middle end of October. So we have different character, higher acidity, different grips in the tannins, different fruit, much more multi-layered wine, but wine that sometimes needs more time to develop. So exactly, we have to consider these kind of things in the vintage. We have one vintage then that is an exception, is 2016, sorry, that we consider exactly the best one in the area in the last 30 years, 40 or 50 years. Because exactly it's a concentration of fruit character, well-balanced wines, and multi-layer and traditional style of wine at the same time. So it's a quite a unique character. But basically, yeah, 2015 is much more a warmer vintage. So we have character of softer tannins, good fruit character, very approachable wine that are really expressing great character since the early stages.
Yeah, it's ready to drink now, isn't it? It's beautiful.
And Matteo, just to jump in there, we've got a question from Nick, which I think is quite an important one. What about individual vineyards? How do they differ? We've got access to 2 of yours. Would you like to explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, of course. There is exactly as I told you, 170 different single vineyards. We are not calling them single vineyards. We call geographical mentions because they're sub areas basically. So the difference is quite big. You see the map. There is a good distinction. There is on the right side the commune of Serralunga d'Alba, Castiglione Falletto, Monforte, with wines that have much more character. Exactly, the kind of soil there is giving the wine a different tannic structure, wine with much more austere character, wines that can really age for a really long time. On the other side, on the left of the map, we have communes like La Morra, Verduno, Novello, where we have softer style of wine, much more fruity character, much more floral character, wines that really are much more elegant, much more feminine style, like to say. This is a general distinction, but inside of the Barolo area, with recent research that we made in the 90s, talking about the different kinds of soil, we can find different kind of soil, 8 different kind of soils, and this is the best kind. So I'm not saying that all these different areas are completely different from each other, but there are significant differences. We have the west border, the east border, so there are a lot of different characters. Then this aspect, it is linked to the soil. Then, as I told you before, different individual wineries producing wine in different areas. So you can really find different expression also inside of the same area, according to the style, much more modern, much more tradition, length of maceration, all these kind of things. The philosophy of production that we have is to produce, of course, a great wine. But even more important, to produce a wine that will be recognizable. And you are recognizable only on 2 things. The soil character, the grape varietal, and you're lucky because we work with native grapes, and the philosophy of production. In this way, the soil is the most important, one of the 3 most important things. And these differences in the areas are significant for us, are helping us to have an individual expression of Barolo.
So I might just jump in here quickly, if that's all right with you, Matteo. So someone's asked I think Nick asked the question here about moving towards a more Burgundian style of classification system. And I remember when I was first learning about Barolo, I tended to drop Barolo into the same bucket as Burgundy in the sense of classification systems. And I'll try and explain that as quickly as I can here. So the way that a lot of people tend to look at Barolo, and I'm not sure this is the right way of looking at it, is you look at Barolo, which is the entire map of what I have in front of you here, everything here as Bourgogne. Would be the same, that Bourgogne level AOC, right? Then you move into the sub-regions such as Grinzane Cavour, Castiglione Faletto, etc. You'd see them as the sites like Gevrey-Chambertin, Vosne-Romanée, things like that, where you've got the village levels. And it's very easy to kind of put that in and fit that in. And then the next level, where you get to the Grand Crus of each of those villages, it's easy to fit the cru within this map here as being, you know, separate little Grand Crus. But there's one important factor that is being completely ignored within that measurement between those classification systems. And that's the fact that historically, and Matteo touched on this very, very accurately, historically, the vast majority of Baroli, of Barolos produced in this area, were the sum of a number of different sub-crus that together make something that is significantly better. And if you think of Burgundy as Bourgogne, which is the whole map, the whole thing together, as being the absolute bog standard, blended from all areas, and it's the lowest quality. But the reality is, within Barolo, a lot of the time, historically, there would be a producer who would have something from Castiglione Faletto, for example, and he would realize that his grapes were very, very good for one aspect, but they were missing something else. They had a lot of fruit, but they didn't have enough tannin. So they'd go across to someone else and they'd say, all right, I'm going to trade some of this with you, and I'm going to get some of your fruit. And they would realize that together, by adding together the sum of those individual pieces would equate to something that is greater than the sum of its parts. And that's something that I think is ignored in Barolo. And I think in today we're going too far down the Burgundiization, I've just made up a word there, excuse me, of Barolo, because we're going closer and closer into the different crus and having I only like this cru and I don't like this cru. And yeah, I think it's a dangerous route we go down. And Matteo, I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, you're right. The tradition, you said an important aspect. The tradition was to produce a Barolo made from sourcing grape in the different areas. So straight Barolo blending different areas. We have to remember that Barolo is made with 100% of Nebbiolo, difficult grape. So it's really difficult to have a fantastic wine made with 100% of one grape. Even more if we're talking about Nebbiolo. So blending different areas gave us much more opportunity to put together different character. Maybe the structure, the complexity coming from Serralunga or Castiglione Faletto, and the elegant and refined character coming from La Mora. So putting together the fruit of these two areas, the result is to have a great Barolo. The Barolo that we're tasting now is just made with this kind of philosophy. We have property in 3 different communes, La Mora, Verduno, and Serralunga. And this wine is made blending the 3 different areas. And this is one part, and this is also the tradition. The single vineyard, as I told you before, for me doesn't mean to produce a better wine in one way, but is to produce a wine that is much more individual. It's a clear expression of a single plot, of a single area. So in the way to have something that is much more recognizable or unique, makes sense, because it's a clear expression of a place that is unique in the world. So if the single vineyard philosophy has exactly this character, to have something that is unique, to exalt the differences between a cru that we have in Verduno from the cru from Serralunga. Of course, it's much more complicated, because I'm agreeing with you. It's something that, but you have to understand that we as producers, we like complicated things. That's very complex. We always ask for simplification when we are really complicated on our side, and this is much more complicated. But at the end of the day, it's a different expression, much more unique, much more linked to your property, your ownership of the vineyard, and your specific style. On the other side, the Barolo that we are tasting now, blend with two different vineyards, is a fantastic expression because exactly give you much more chances to complete the character of the wine and the character of the Nebbiolo grape coming from different parts of the area.
That's great. Thank you. I've got a question which I think is someone's asked us on here. We've been asked a couple of times, Matteo. We're not tasting any Barbaresco today, but people call Barolo the wine of kings and Barbaresco the wine of queens. Now, what are the differences between Barolo and Barbaresco for you? And obviously, you're going to say Barolo is your favorite. Is that the case, or what are the differences?
Barolo, yeah, the area is not far away. Barbaresco is an area that we cannot see on the map, of course, because the map of the Barolo is northern northern east of Barolo. It's a smaller area. We're talking about only 3 communes. The total amount of hectares is 750, so 1/3, you can say, of the Barolo area. Generally speaking, the Barbaresco is much more elegant, much more refined. This is why it's called the queen in this way, or a wine that is much more based on elegance, finesse, while Barolo much more on the structure and complexity. So this is something that is in the general way. Then it all depends on the different expressions of the wineries. A big distinction is much more stylistic. In the Barolo area, much more different styles because the background is much more far away in years, talking about exactly the middle of the 19th century. On the Barbaresco, they were first of all grape producers, so farmers selling their own grapes. Then they started to produce the wine basically much more in the 60s, following one important leader, that is Angelo Gaia, of course. So much more, the style is much more uniform in the Barbaresco area. So in the Barolo, much more structure, much more complexity, and much more different styles, more different approach. In the Barbaresco area, more elegance, more refined wines, and a style that is much more uniform among all the different wineries.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Matteo.
That was the perfect answer for the politician that is the president of a consortio there. Perfect answer. Still talking up his region without bagging out anyone else. That's perfect. So that brings us basically to the end of our 3 wines here. We're just shy of an hour here. I got a lot of feedback from everyone saying that we needed to keep it to an hour. So I've been pretty strict on that now. There's still plenty of wine in everyone's in everyone's bottles, I'm sure. I'm sure there is. We really appreciate you all coming tonight. Been a fantastic turnout, and especially a huge thank you to Matteo. Thank you so much for coming there, mate. It's been fantastic to go on the journey with you here. It's been amazing to represent your wines in Australia. We're so proud to be the representative here in Australia, and I think we've made a lot of people happy with your wines. I know you've made me very happy with your wines, so I really appreciate it. Thank you, mate.
You're very kind. Thank you very much for this opportunity. It was fantastic, and really I hope to meet again personally in the near future. But thank you very much for the attention.
And something I'd like to say to everyone: if you do happen to find yourself in Piemonte when lockdown is over and you're able to get there, please look up Matteo, because you've got a spa and a hotel that you're opening. How's that going? Is the spa ready yet? And go and see him and go and have a go in his spa.
Grazie. And good food.
And good food.
Great food. There's absolutely great food. I can attest to that. I can definitely attest to that. Okay.
Ciao Matteo, quando veniamo in Italia veniamo a trovarti.
Sì, con molto piacere. Grazie. Thank you very much. Arrivederci.
Arrivederci.
Grazie.
Any other questions we've got there, Luke? Anyone coming through on the chat box there?
Just a very brief one with regards to aging. Is there a kind of optimum aging that we can do on the Barolos?
Great question, Matteo. Again, I'm gonna throw this one to you, mate.
Barolo is a wine that can age for 20-25 years. The differences are according to different vintages. Warmer vintages are evolving a little bit earlier, but still we are talking about a long time. What is important for me to say that a great wine, by the way, has to be great ever. So it's true that this wine that we are tasting it will evolve in the next 8-10 years, but if you like to drink this wine now, you have really fantastic sensation. So this is linked to one aspect, balance. A great wine is to be a balanced one among the tannic structure, the acidity, the fruit content, the alcohol content, all these kind of things. So, but all no problem for long aging, but exactly also if you like to enjoy this style of wines earlier, the Barolo, the wine is to be in a position to express the best character also in the early stages. Normally, exactly, we have, by the way, 20-25 years to wait if you want, but my suggestion is to drink the wine earlier, of course.
And then just a very brief one, and it might be opening up a can of worms. I know that we've had the question put towards the Mosswood team in Margaret River a few weeks ago. With the aging potential of Barolo, is it just tradition that means you still use cork, or because we obviously use Stelvin more now in Australia?
Yes, exactly. This is a good point. There was a discussion that we had here in the area for many years also. I have to say that nowadays we have also good technical cork made from natural cork that are working very well. Our decision is to work exactly, instead of working with Stelvin, it is really also a good solution, but it's a solution that also can create maybe in the long term could be some problems. We prefer to work on technical cork made with still with cork. It is techniques that has been developed since a while now. So we're taking the cork, transforming the cork in powder, and taking out all the external molecules that can create problem with tainted cork, and they are recreating the cork using 65% of cork and 35% of synthetic things. So on my point of view, it's a good compromise. So it's still maintaining the positive things of the natural cork, taking out the negative ones. So this is our decision. Of course, is an opening discussion. This is our choice. We are using this kind of cork since more than 10 years now, and we are completely satisfied about the evolution of the wines. But maybe it could be also that other corks like Stelvin could work in the right way. This is our decision. The natural cork is fantastic, but is really frustrating from my side. I mean that because we are not able to grant 100% of our production. This is really a pity. So we try to do everything positive to avoid this kind of situation.
And just quickly, Matteo, just taking off the hat of the owner of Ascari and putting your hat on of the Consorzio, it's not illegal, is it, to use a Stelvin cap in Barolo?
Yes, exactly, it's legal because okay, it's simple. In the old days, there were prescriptions. So for DOCG wine was only allowed natural cork. Then this situation changed, and the situation was that now you're allowed to use all the cork that you like, with the exception if in the law of Barolo there is some limitation. So it's up to the producer to put this kind of limitation. So you have to change the law of the Barolo. In this occasion, this discussion happened about 7 years ago when the general law changed. So gave us the opportunity to use all the cork that we like, with the exception with limitations that we can put on the law. There was a meeting regarding these kind of things, and people they decide to leave the freedom to use everything that we want. So it's legal to have also the Stelvin on Barolo. Nobody is using at the moment, but it's legal.
Okay, interesting. That's very interesting, and I think that'll be something that potentially will be something that we may have to face in the future, and something we may have to think about in the future. Yeah. So, thank you so much, Matteo. Again, thank you for your time this morning, your time this evening, our time.
Really a pleasure.
Thank you, Alistair, again for joining us from the UK. I hope this has been such a fantastic opportunity for us all to join each other from around the world while we're locked in our own houses. And it's been I know I definitely have learnt so much about a topic that I already love and already think I know a lot about. I've learned a lot more. So thank you very much. So Luke, any other questions from the group here?
No, just a lot of thank yous and a lot of appreciation for the wine, which is really nice to see.
That's what we want to see. That's exactly what we want to see. So
Thank you, Matteo.
we don't want to hold you guys up. That's been just over an hour now. So we want you to enjoy the wines, continue to drink them. There's plenty more. And Matteo, we look very forward to getting the 2016s in, mate. We look very forward to it. They sound fantastic.
Sicuro, yes. Sicuramente, vi aspettiamo. Ciao.
Grazie mille.
Prego, grazie.
Bye bye.
Ciao a tutti e a tua famiglia.
Grazie.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Grazie.
Thank you very much.
Good. Excellent.
Okay, guys.
Thank you.
We're gonna call it
Very
there.
nice. Thank you.
Have a great evening, everyone, and we'll see you next week, where we're talking about Tuscany. We're going south into the center of Italy towards Tuscany. We will have another special guest, which is fantastic. One of our producers from Tuscany, Paula Cook from Le Micine. And we've also got some more tastings coming up. We've got all throughout June, we've got tastings. I'm just about to put online another tasting with Peter Fraser from Yangara as well, which is very exciting. So yeah, it's all going off. So feel free to come along, join us, and let's enjoy this lockdown while we can. Why not?
All right. I'm going to do a man does.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, man.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.